Let's jump into the Team Hochberg Traffic Center and get the latest on your morning commute with Jim Telemonte.
In Elmhurst on 83 northbound at North Avenue, there's a crash. On the Bishop Ford Freeway outbound, the ramp to eastbound 8094 is still closed after an early morning crash with injuries. There's also a secondary crash before that point, blocking the right lane past 159th Street. With that ramp closed, traffic's heading to southbound 394 to double back, but there is heavy congestion on southbound 394 from 8094 to Glenwood Dyer Road. Inbound Ford Freeway, little congestion approaching the merge. It's 12 minutes, 8094 to the Ryan. On the inbound Ryan to get from 95th to downtown, it's 15 minutes. Stevenson runs 28 minutes, 355 to Lakeshore Drive. I'm Jim Telemonte.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our AM 560 Weather Center. Here's our AccuWeather meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Clouds and breezy, showers for the afternoon. High today 50, cloudy tonight, low 36. Rain or snow shower in spots for tomorrow morning. Some snow by the afternoon, 1 to 2 inches. A high tomorrow at 38. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
50 at O'Hare, 45 in Aurora. Next news 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So just as he was going to get to 1 million vaccinations a day, Joe Biden last week has a big moment to announce he's ending America's longest war. But here was the upshot.
When I came to office, I inherited a diplomatic agreement duly negotiated between the government of the United States and the Taliban that all U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021, just 3 months after my inauguration. That's what we inherited, that commitment. It's perhaps not what I would have negotiated myself, but it was an agreement made by the United States government, and that means something. So in keeping with that agreement and with our national interest, the United States will begin our final withdrawal, begin it on May 1 of this year.
Okay, so the upshot is I'm sticking to the Trump program. For more on this, pleased to be joined again for our weekly hit with Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of books including Wiki at War, Conflict in a Socially Networked World, and he's got a new book coming.
Oh, really?
So time for the spring, a good beach read.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I
have it by Memorial Day, Jim.
It's called Brutal War, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea, which I also believe was the name of the follow-up album to Holiday in Cambodia from the Dead Kennedys back in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. Brutal War, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea. Jim, congratulations on the new book. Thanks.
Thanks. Speaking of endless interminable fighting, look, I think there's a difference between, first of all, I thought much of what Biden's rhetoric he said about the decision on Afghanistan was suspect, and some of it actually quite offensive. But I thought there was a significant difference between, and I know even that Trump's has been talking about this, but what President Trump negotiated was an agreement based on conditions on the ground. What we've seen, actually a little bit from the Trump administration, and now in spades from the Biden administration, is disregarding the facts on the ground and just pushing ahead with a withdrawal, but without the companion piece, which explain to us how you're going to protect U.S. interests. Look, American troops just went there because we forgot them, or we just couldn't figure out what to do. They were there for a reason, and really twofold. One was preventing large-scale terrorist sanctuaries. We've seen that and how that does not go well. We saw it in Afghanistan, we saw it in Syria, we saw it in Libya. And the other is we want South Asia to be stable. That is in our U.S. interest. We have a nuclear Pakistan, a nuclear India, kind of like them not to come to blows, and we want the region to be stable, principally because we want India to be focused on China. So we have good reasons to want a stable Afghanistan, in addition to the fact that it would be healthier for the Afghan people. But what we've never really heard from Biden is how we're going to continue to contribute to that, because that's why our troops were there.
So General David Petraeus said, it sounds like this is akin to what you're saying, we're going to lose that platform that Afghanistan provides for the kind of regional counterterrorism campaign we want to be able to effect. I'm really afraid that we're going to look back 2 years from now and regret the decision. He goes on to say, I just wonder whether we might not have sought to manage it with a modest, sustained commitment that could have ensured Al-Qaeda, ISIS would not reestablish sanctuaries.
We were spending in Afghanistan under Trump in a year about what we spent under Obama in a week. The number of troops we actually had in Afghanistan were less than the number of troops that we have running around the U.S. Capitol. And these were not troops that were fighting an endless war. The Afghans were defending themselves against the Taliban, that's true. But the U.S. troops were largely providing advice and support, which is something we do all over the world. And our troops were not generally in harm's way or in combat. I actually found the whole thing, just America's longest war, I just find that offensive. I mean, the Afghans have been fighting this war for years, and they're doing all the dying and the bleeding. And to talk about it like it's our war, it's just really quite offensive. And actually, I found much of Biden kind of strolling around Arlington, I found that offensive. Presidents don't use cemeteries as political backdrops. And when Reagan went to Point du Hoc, it was to look the guys that climbed the cliffs in the eye and say, thank you for your service to your country. I found that offensive. Biden also said, well, I'm the only president that's had a son in battle. Well, I found that incredibly offensive. Every American president, every man and woman in battle, to them is like their children, and they feel that loss is painful, and that responsibility is painful as anyone. Somehow that he has some kind of private pain. I just found that actually despicable.
Well,
I see a real lack of leadership here.
All right, what about former President Trump is urging another date to be selected for the pullout of U.S. troops from Afghanistan? Does it give you any pause that they're doing it on 9/11, or should they be pulling out now?
Well, first of all, it's nonsense. We should pull the troops out when they're not needed.
Right.
Not on a holiday or an anniversary or something. The other thing is it actually is unhelpful because it distorts the understanding of why the U.S. presidents continued in Afghanistan. It was not revenge for 9/11. It was looking forward to future interests, not looking backward. So I thought that was unhelpful. And the third thing is if I'm Joe Terrorist, oh, dude, that's the day I want to do a terrorist attack.
Right. I wanted to get your reaction to something else that popped late last week that was a big story last year. The New York Times, the Gray Lady, Kremlin placing bounties on American troops in Afghanistan. Of course, that was anonymously sourced. That turns out to be untrue. I recall that was the basis for accusations of treason against the Trump administration, calls for hearings and so on and so forth. And that was just Liz Cheney.
Right. So so there's a lesson to be learned here. When people interpret intelligence and it's completely Manichaean, in other words, the people who have one politics interpret it one way, and people that have another politics interpret it another way, that's a bit of a red flag that you ought to say, okay, what's really going on here? And the other thing is put that in context with all the other information that we have that we know is true, right? Because we don't know if it's true or not. We don't have access to intelligence. And I think in both those cases, when you heard that story, there was a moment to say, I'm not really sure if this is right. But it was completely consistent with that reporting under Biden and Trump, which is we consistently see the three-letter guys, ABC, CNN, CBS, NSA, consistently reporting what the politically convenient message for them is, and not doing investigative work. I'll never forget, I went to White House Correspondents' Dinner one year, and Woodward and Bernstein got up and they were like, talking about freedom of the press and everything else. And I'm going, do you realize that the people sitting in front of you, they do nothing like you did? They did nothing like confirm the source, get the story, get the truth. They just report the stuff that's damaging to Trump and nice to the other guy. Why are you saying nice things to them? You should be berating them for failing your discipline.
I want to get your take on another theater, this Russia and Putin. Garry Kasparov, the chess master and human rights activist, was none too charitable with Trump on Putin and Russia, but he's also not happy with Biden. He cannot believe that Biden proposed a summit with somebody he described appropriately as a killer. Writing the Journal, Kasparov says Mr. Biden gave Putin exactly what he craves, equal status with the President of the United States, even if it never comes to pass. The invitation sends the message that Putin is irreplaceable, still worthy of the support of the oligarchs and elites whose fortunes he guarantees.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing from Biden is exactly what we saw from Obama, and it's kind of this creeping deterrence, which is I want to do just enough to make the other guy back off. But there's huge asymmetry of interest in these things, and often what you actually do is the other guy just escalates because you're just telling him that you're not going to do very much, so he just does a little more. Trump also said, hey, I want to meet with these guys, we learn to live together, which every European leader says as well. But I think there's a difference there. I think under Trump what we saw is a president that demonstrated up front, an unshakable willingness to protect his interests and not be moved on that. And so it's the difference between a poker player that puts in a nickel and another nickel and another nickel and another, and the guy that just stands there and puts all the chips on the table and says, yeah, dude, I'm all in. And I think Putin respects power, and I think he looks at this kind of creeping approach to diplomacy as weakness, as authoritarian regimes often do.
Sure. I mean, you don't need to be a great strategist to watch what Biden does everywhere and say, oh, well, he's doing it here as well. I mean, it's the message at the border. No, please don't come, but we're not going to do anything if you do. Right. Well, that's what's going to happen. People will come.
It's very Obama-like. There's only two switches here. It's either very tentative and risk-averse, or just on the other hand, the other guy is weak. It's just bullying and in your face. There's kind of like nothing in between. It's like you give away everything in the front end and then you beg for an Iran deal, or you just bullying other guys into submission because they're weak. And Trump did neither of those things. It's just different. Trump went into a negotiation with, I'm going to be a hard negotiator. I'm going to fight for my interests. But you know what? I recognize that you have interests too, and you're not going to come to the table and do a deal unless you feel you get something for that. And if it's a bad deal, you're not going to hold up to it. So it's a completely different way of negotiating, of conducting foreign policy, and we'll see which one plays out stronger. I don't think we're getting better foreign policy than we got under the last administration. And that's not a partisan comment. It's just an objective observation.
Yeah, I'm sure Neville Chamberlain would agree. Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, VP of the Catherine and Shelby Cullom Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. His new book, which comes out May 4th, so pick it up, Brutal War, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea, 1942. Jim, thanks as always.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. On AM 560, The Answer.
As time goes by, we can all use a little more help getting around. Staying mobile and independent can be tough for some, especially our aging loved ones. When you need assistance finding the right quality products to make life easier and more enjoyable, there's Mars Medical Supply. Home medical equipment and supplies to keep you or someone you care for independent and mobile. Whether it's living with certain medical conditions and disorders, or recovering from injuries and surgeries that are difficult to cope with, shopping for specialty products can be frustrating. The Mars Medical Consultants will help you find the right solution and feature a full line of lift chairs chairs, scooters, knee walkers, power wheelchairs, and rollator walkers. There's also financing available on purchases over $200 through Care Credit to help you get the products you need right away. For home medical equipment and supplies, rely on Mars Medical Supply, 333 West Maple Street in New Lenox. Browse products and featured items online at marsmedicalsupply.com. Mars Medical.